Do make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Snowflakes stung my face like tiny needles as I sat shivering in the driver's seat of my car. The engine had long gone cold, the heater nothing but a memory, and my breath came out in short, ghostly clouds. The world outside was silent, too silent, except for the howling wind that rocked my little car like it was nothing but a toy left in a storm. I remember pressing my forehead against the icy window, wondering if this was how it ended. Not with a scream, not with a crash, not even with someone holding my hand, just me, abandoned by the two people who should have been protecting me. My dad and his new wife had thrown me out into the storm like garbage. But what none of us expected was that someone else was watching. Someone who would change everything. Because the last thing I remember before slipping into darkness was my grandpa's voice calling my name. And that's where my story begins. I should have known it was coming. The glares from my stepmother across the dinner table, the subtle way my dad avoided my eyes, the whispers behind closed doors that would stop the second I walked past. But even with all the signs, I never imagined they'd actually do it. It was Christmas Eve, the night families are supposed to come together. But instead of togetherness, I got betrayal. My stepmom stood by the door, arms crossed, her lips curled in that triumphant smirk I'd come to hate. My dad's face was stone, as if I was nothing but a stranger standing in his house. "Get out," he said coldly, his voice carrying no trace of the father I once adored. The words cut deeper than the icy wind waiting outside. My heart pounded as I stared at him, searching for some flicker of hesitation. "Dad, it's a blizzard out there. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," he muttered, not even looking at me. My stepmom's hand rested on his arm like she had finally won. And maybe she had. So there I was, thrown out, left to the mercy of the storm, with nothing but my car and the clothes on my back. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I'd be fine, trying to ignore how fast the frost was crawling up the windows. The hours blurred together. My phone died. My hands went numb. I tried to sing to myself, anything to keep awake, but the cold crept in like a living thing, wrapping itself around me, dragging me closer to the edge. My eyelids grew heavy. My body begged me to rest. I remember whispering, "This can't be it. This can't be how it ends." And then, through the fog of my fading consciousness, I saw a light. At first, I thought it was just another hallucination, a star breaking through the storm, or headlights from some stranger passing by. But the beam grew brighter, steady, cutting through the blizzard with purpose. Footsteps crunched against the snow. Slow. Heavy. Familiar. The door of my car yanked open, and through the blur, I saw the weathered face of a man I hadn't seen in years. His voice shook as he said my name, as if afraid I might not answer. "Baby girl, what did they do to you?" It was my grandpa. And in that frozen moment, hovering between life and death, I realized, my story wasn't ending tonight. It was just beginning. The warmth hit me like a tidal wave. 1 minute I was frozen stiff, fighting to keep my eyes open in that icy coffin of a car, and the next I was wrapped in blankets, a fire crackling nearby, and the scent of wood smoke filling my lungs. I blinked slowly, disoriented, until my vision settled on the room. My grandpa's cabin. I remembered it from childhood, the place my dad never wanted me to visit after Mom died. The place he said was bad for me. But right now, bad or not, it was the only reason I was alive. "Easy now," Grandpa said, his voice gravelly with age but steady as ever. He was kneeling beside me, his rough hands tucking the blanket tighter around my shoulders. His eyes, grey, sharp, full of something I hadn't seen in anyone for years, studied me like he was trying to piece together a broken puzzle. "You were half dead out there," he muttered, shaking his head. "If I hadn't gone out to check the traps tonight," he didn't finish. He didn't have to. I swallowed hard, my throat raw. They threw me out, I whispered. The words sounded unreal, even to me. Dad and her. They said I wasn't their problem anymore. Grandpa's jaw tightened. He looked away, staring into the flames. For a moment, I thought he might break something. I knew it would come to this, he said finally, his voice low, almost to himself. That woman's poison. But your father, he stopped again, as if the words weighed too much. What about him? I pushed, my voice shaking. Grandpa turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. There are things you don't know about your father. Things he's kept buried for years. And she, your stepmother, she knows them too. That's why she wants you gone. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Why? What could I possibly have to do with their secrets? Grandpa leaned closer, his face lit by firelight, his voice just above a whisper. Because, sweetheart, you're the one person who could expose him. And they're terrified of you. The room seemed to shrink, the fire's warmth no match for the chill that ran through me. Suddenly, being thrown into the storm didn't feel random, it felt deliberate. Like they'd rather see me buried under the snow than alive in this house. And in that instant, I realized, my survival wasn't an accident. It was a threat. Grandpa's words rattled inside me like loose bones. The one person who could expose him. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, trying to stop the trembling that wasn't from the cold anymore. Expose him for what? I asked, my voice trembling. Grandpa didn't answer right away. He reached for the kettle on the stove, poured steaming water into a chipped mug, and slid it toward me. His silence was worse than words, it meant he was choosing what not to tell me. Grandpa, I pushed, gripping the mug though my hands still shook. You can't just say something like that and stop. What did Dad do? He sighed, sinking into the chair across from me. The firelight deepened the lines on his face, making him look older, wearier. Your father wasn't always the man you saw tonight. Once, he was different. Before your mother died, he was proud of you. Protective. But after she was gone, Grandpa's eyes darkened. He made choices. Dangerous ones. Choices that bound him to people he can't afford to cross. My stomach twisted. What people? Grandpa leaned forward, lowering his voice as though the walls themselves might be listening. Men who wear suits in the day and blood on their hands at night. He owes them more than money, more than loyalty. And your stepmother, she's not just his wife. She's their messenger. I nearly dropped the mug. You're saying, Dad's tied up with criminals? Not tied up, Grandpa corrected. Owned. The words crashed over me, colder than the storm outside. Memories flooded back, Dad's late nights, hushed phone calls, the sudden bursts of anger that came out of nowhere. I'd thought it was grief. Stress. Maybe even guilt for remarrying so quickly. But now, he wants you out of the way, Grandpa continued, because you're your mother's daughter. And she, he stopped again, his jaw tightening. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. She what? Grandpa's eyes locked on mine. Your mother knew things. Things she passed to you without even realizing. And if you start asking the right questions, their whole world comes down. My breath caught. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but deep inside I knew he wasn't. Too many things suddenly made sense. But why not just, I swallowed hard, the word sticking to my throat. Why not just kill me? Grandpa's gaze didn't waver. That's what they thought tonight was for. The mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the wooden floor, the sound exploding in the silence. My heart thundered as his meaning hit me. The blizzard. The car. The cold. They hadn't just thrown me out. They had left me to die. And if Grandpa hadn't found me, I would've. The shattered mug lay in pieces between us, steam rising from the tea that had spilled across the floorboards. My hands trembled, not just from shock but from the weight of everything I was hearing. "My own father," I whispered. "He left me to die." Grandpa didn't flinch. "He did. But you're here, which means they failed. And now that you've survived, the real danger begins." I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. What do I have to do with any of this? Why would they even care about me? Grandpa leaned back in his chair, his eyes clouded with something heavier than sorrow, guilt. "Because of your mother." The room went still. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. "What about her?" I asked, my voice breaking. He took a deep breath. "Before she died, your mother uncovered something. Something that could ruin the men your father serves. She never told me exactly what it was. She said it was safer if I didn't know, but she kept records. Notes. A trail of evidence she was building in secret." My chest tightened. "And she gave them to me?" Grandpa nodded slowly. "Not directly. But she hid them in ways only you would recognize. Clues, woven into the stories she told you, the games you played together, the lullabies she sang. She trusted that one day, when the time was right, you'd see them for what they were." Memories flashed before me, Mom's soft voice humming at night, her handwritten notes tucked into my lunchbox, the way she always pointed out patterns in the simplest things, the stars, the tiles on the kitchen floor, even the stitches on a quilt. I'd never questioned it. Never realized she'd been leaving me breadcrumbs. "But Dad," my voice faltered. "He knows she left something. And he thinks I have it." "Exactly," Grandpa said, his tone hardening. "That's why he and that woman wanted you gone. If you're out of the way, the trail dies with you. But if you're alive, then I'm the key," I finished for him, my heart sinking. Grandpa nodded once. "And that makes you the most dangerous person in their world." The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. I jumped, the sound too close to a gunshot. "Grandpa," I whispered, my throat tight. "If what you're saying is true, if Mom left me these clues, then what happens when I find them?" He looked at me, his eyes glinting with both fear and pride. "Then, sweetheart, you'll have the power to bring them all down. But they'll stop at nothing to make sure you never do." I sat frozen, the weight of destiny pressing down on me, heavier than the snowstorm that had nearly buried me alive. And for the first time in my life, I realized my fight for survival had only just begun. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the frost spreading across my car windows, felt the weight of my father's voice telling me I wasn't his problem anymore. But worse than that, I saw my mother's face. Not the way she looked at the end, pale and fading, but the way she used to look at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Like she was silently urging me to remember something. By dawn, I was sitting at Grandpa's old wooden table, staring at the grooves carved into the surface. He shuffled in from the kitchen with a pot of coffee, setting it down with a grunt. "You didn't sleep," he said flatly. "How could I?" I whispered. My eyes lifted to meet his. "If Mom left me clues, how do I even begin to find them?" Grandpa lowered himself into the chair across from me, his weathered hands curling around a mug. "Think back. Your mother was clever. Subtle. What did she repeat to you, over and over? What stuck in your memory, even when it seemed small or strange?" I racked my brain. Songs. Stories. Little sayings she whispered before bed. Then it hit me, clear as if she were in the room with me. "Follow the stars, and you'll find the truth," I whispered. Grandpa's eyes sharpened. "She said that to you?" "All the time," I said, my pulse quickening. I thought it was just one of her bedtime phrases. But maybe it wasn't. We sat in silence for a moment, the words heavy between us. Then Grandpa stood, moving toward the back wall where an old chest sat beneath a shelf of dusty books. He knelt, pulled it open, and retrieved something wrapped in a faded cloth. When he unwrapped it, I gasped. It was Mom's quilt, the one she made for me when I was little. I hadn't seen it in years. Grandpa spread it across the table. She left this here before, everything. I never touched it. I stared at the quilt, my hands trembling as I traced the stitches. At first it looked like any ordinary pattern of stars and swirls. But then I noticed something. Certain stars were stitched with a double thread, slightly thicker than the others. "Grandpa," I breathed, my heart racing. "It's a map." He leaned closer, his face tense. "A map to what?" Before I could answer, the sound of crunching snow drifted through the cabin walls. Slow, heavy, measured. Grandpa froze. His eyes flicked to the window, then to me. "Stay quiet," he whispered. My chest tightened as I clutched the quilt. Whoever was out there wasn't just a lost traveler. The storm had cleared. Whoever it was had come here. For us. The footsteps outside crunched closer, slow and deliberate, as if whoever it was wanted us to know they were there. My heart slammed against my ribs. I gripped the quilt so tightly my knuckles turned white, my eyes darting to Grandpa. His face was stone, his jaw clenched as he quietly reached beneath the table. A second later, he slid out an old hunting rifle, the wood polished from years of use. He didn't say a word, he didn't have to. We listened. One step. Another. Then silence. The kind of silence that makes the air itself feel dangerous. I swallowed hard. "Grandpa," I whispered. "What if it's—" "I know who it is," he cut me off, his voice low but certain. His eyes didn't leave the window. "They found you sooner than I thought." My stomach dropped. "You mean, Dad's people?" The floorboards creaked under my shifting weight. The quilt slipped slightly, and in the flicker of firelight, I noticed something I hadn't before, a series of faint numbers stitched along the edges of the map pattern. My breath caught. This wasn't just a design, it was coded. But before I could study it further, a shadow passed the frosted window. Broad shoulders. Slow movement. Pausing, listening. Then, knock. 3 hard, deliberate bangs against the cabin door. "Mr. Walker," a man's voice drawled, muffled through the wood. "Calm. Too calm. We know she's in there. Why don't you save us all some trouble and send her out?" My blood ran cold. Grandpa stood, leveling the rifle at the door. His voice was steady, sharp as steel. "If you know she's here, then you know I'll put a hole through the first man who tries to take her." A low chuckle came from outside. "You're too old for games, old man. She doesn't belong to you. She belongs to her father." Something inside me snapped. Belongs. Like I was a possession to be handed over. My fingers dug into the quilt, the fabric crumpling beneath my fists. Grandpa didn't move from his stance, but his voice dropped just enough for me to hear. "Take that quilt. Hide it. Now." I hesitated, but the sharpness in his eyes jolted me into action. I stuffed the quilt into the old chest he'd opened earlier and pulled another blanket over it, my hands shaking as the knocking grew harder. "Last chance," the man outside called, his tone slipping into menace. "Open this door, or we come in." Grandpa cocked the rifle, the sound loud and final in the cabin. "Try me." The silence that followed was worse than the knocking. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the door, every muscle in my body braced for it to explode inward. But instead, the footsteps retreated. Slow at first. Then fading into the distance. The cabin was quiet again. Too quiet. Grandpa lowered the rifle, but his expression didn't soften. "They'll be back," he said grimly. "And next time, they won't knock." I glanced at the chest where the quilt now lay hidden, my heart hammering. The first clue from Mom was in my hands, but now, so was a target. And suddenly, I knew, surviving the blizzard had been the easy part. The fire had burned low, throwing long shadows across the cabin walls. I sat on the floor, the quilt spread out in front of me, my fingers tracing every star-shaped stitch as if Mom herself had sewn them into my skin. Grandpa sat nearby, the rifle leaning against his chair, his eyes flicking every so often toward the door as if expecting it to burst open any second. The silence pressed heavy on us, but I couldn't let it stop me. Not now. Look here, I whispered, pointing to one of the stars stitched with double thread. It's not random. These stars form a pattern. See? Grandpa leaned forward, squinting. A constellation. I nodded, my heart racing. But not one I recognize. And here, I dragged my finger along the edge, tracing the faint numbers stitched in a looping hand. Coordinates. She disguised them as decorative stitching. That's why no one noticed. Grandpa's eyes sharpened. Coordinates to what? I swallowed. That's what we have to find out. We worked in silence, piecing it together. The stars aligned into a rough shape, pointing toward one corner of the quilt where the stitching was thicker, darker. And right there, hidden in the fabric, was something I had never noticed as a child. 3 letters embroidered in pale thread, almost invisible unless you knew to look. M-E-L, I whispered. Grandpa inhaled sharply. Your mother's initials. My chest tightened. She signed it. But why there? He rubbed his jaw, his expression darkening. Because that corner is the end of the map. Whatever this quilt points to, it's something she wanted you to find. Something she hid. I pressed my palm against the initials, a chill rippling down my spine. For the first time, I felt like Mom's hand was guiding mine. But the moment shattered when we both froze at the same time. The crunch of tires on snow. Not footsteps. Not one man. A vehicle. Grandpa moved fast, grabbing the rifle and motioning for me to douse the fire. I scrambled to throw a blanket over the quilt and stomped out the flames until the room plunged into darkness, lit only by the thin glow of moonlight through the frosted windows. The sound grew louder. Closer. Headlights cut through the trees, beams sweeping across the cabin walls. Grandpa crouched low, pulling me down beside him. His breath was steady, but I could feel the tension rolling off him. They've come back, he murmured, his voice a rasp. And they brought more this time. My pulse thundered as the engine cut off outside. Doors slammed. Heavy boots hit the snow. And in that breathless moment, clutching the quilt that held my mother's secret, I understood one thing with icy clarity. They weren't leaving until they had me. The cabin walls felt thinner than paper as the men gathered outside. I counted at least 3 distinct voices, maybe more. Their boots crunched in the snow, circling, testing the place like wolves stalking prey. Grandpa crouched by the window, rifle cradled in his hands, his eyes narrowed to slits. They're not just here to scare us this time, he muttered. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loudly I thought they'd hear it. The quilt was hidden beneath the old chest again, but I could almost feel it pulsing there, as though Mom's secret was alive, begging to be protected. Then came the first bang, louder than before. A fist against the door. Walker, a voice barked. Rough. Authoritative. We're not playing anymore. Hand her over, and maybe we let you keep your cabin standing. Grandpa's jaw clenched. He shouted back, voice like gravel. This is my house. You want her, you'll have to come through me first. A low laugh echoed outside. Old man, that's exactly what we planned. The second bang wasn't a fist. It was a boot. The door shuddered, dust drifting from the frame. I flinched, my breath catching. Grandpa, I started, but he silenced me with a sharp shake of his head. "Take this," he whispered, reaching into the drawer of his desk. He pressed something small and cold into my palm, a brass key on a fraying string. "What's this?" I whispered, clutching it. "Not now. Just keep it safe," he said quickly, his voice urgent but steady. "If they take me, you run. Do you hear me? You run, and you follow what your mother left." My throat tightened. "I'm not leaving you." The door shook again, harder. Wood splintered. "You might not have a choice," he hissed. The men shouted outside, their voices overlapping. Orders. Demands. Threats. Then the sound of metal scraping, something heavy dragged against the porch. Grandpa's face darkened. "They're bringing tools. They mean to break us in." My hands shook as I clutched the key. The quilt. My mother's clue. My grandfather's warning. The storm outside hadn't killed me, but this felt worse. Another slam rattled the cabin. A crack split down the doorframe. Cold air seeped in. Grandpa lifted the rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Stay behind me," he commanded. The world slowed. My breath came in shallow gasps. And then the door exploded inward with a crash, and shadowed figures surged through the threshold. The door flew open with a deafening crack, snow swirling into the cabin like a ghostly flood. 3 men stormed inside, their faces shadowed by hoods and the glint of steel in their hands, crowbars, pistols, flashlights. "Stay back." Grandpa barked, the rifle raised. His voice thundered through the small room, and for a split second, they froze. But then the one in front smirked. "You wouldn't shoot us, old man. Not unless you want the girl taken in pieces." His words sent a chill straight through me. The rifle cracked. A deafening blast split the air, and the nearest man staggered back with a howl, clutching his shoulder as blood sprayed across the snow at the threshold. The cabin erupted into chaos. Shouts. Scrambling feet. One of them lunged at Grandpa, swinging his crowbar. Grandpa met him with the rifle's stock, slamming it across the man's jaw. "Run!" Grandpa shouted at me. But my legs wouldn't move. My back pressed against the chest where the quilt was hidden, my hand clenched around the brass key he'd given me. "Run where?" "Leave him." Another man surged toward me, his pistol raised. My scream tore from my throat before I could think. Then, instinct took over. I grabbed the lantern from the shelf and hurled it at him. Glass shattered, flames burst across the wooden floor. The man cursed, stumbling back as fire licked his boots. The cabin filled with smoke and the acrid stench of burning oil. "Out," one of them shouted. "Get the girl outside." Strong hands clamped around my wrist. I fought, kicking, clawing, but he dragged me toward the broken door, snow and firelight clashing in my vision. "Let her go," Grandpa roared. Another shot cracked. The man yanked me aside just as the bullet ripped into the doorframe inches from his head. I twisted, desperate, and my fingers brushed the quilt under the chest lid. Mom's secret. My salvation. Without thinking, I snatched a corner of it free and shoved it into my coat. The man hauling me didn't notice. His grip was iron, his breath hot and sour against my cheek as he hissed, "You should have frozen, girl. Would have been cleaner." Something inside me broke. I rammed my elbow into his gut with every ounce of strength I had. He staggered, grip loosening. "Grandpa!" I screamed. The old man spun, rifle raised. Our eyes locked for a split second, his full of fire and something else, fear for me. Then he fired. The man dragging me crumpled into the snow, his grip finally gone. I stumbled free, gasping, clutching the quilt against my chest. But the last man standing wasn't retreating. He raised his pistol, his aim set not on me, on Grandpa. And in that heartbeat, I knew, The next shot could take the only person left who was fighting for me. The gunman's pistol gleamed in the firelight, his finger already tightening on the trigger. I swear time slowed. I could hear the hiss of the wind through the shattered door, the crackle of the flames crawling up the cabin wall, the thunder of my own heartbeat. Grandpa stood steady, rifle leveled, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He wouldn't be fast enough. I still clutched the brass key in one hand, the quilt bundled under my coat with the other. Mom's legacy. Proof that could tear everything wide open. If I ran now, I could escape with the secret. But if I ran, Grandpa would fall. The gunman sneered. End of the line, old man. No. The scream ripped from my throat before I even realized I'd moved. I hurled myself forward, slamming into the side of the gunman just as he fired. The blast roared in my ear, deafening, the smell of gunpowder sharp and hot. The bullet missed Grandpa by inches, tearing through the cabin wall. The man cursed, struggling to shake me off. I clawed at his arm, my nails digging into flesh, every ounce of panic and rage exploding out of me. He shoved me hard, and I hit the floor, the quilt spilling halfway from my coat. His eyes snapped to it. Recognition flared. That's it, he growled, reaching down. That's what she's been hiding. No. I lunged, but Grandpa was faster. The rifle thundered. The man's body jerked, then crumpled, his eyes wide, his hand outstretched toward the quilt as he collapsed onto the floorboards. Blood spread across the wood, seeping into the cracks. For a moment, there was only silence. Smoke curled through the cabin. My chest heaved, my ears rang, and I couldn't stop shaking. Grandpa lowered the rifle, his breath heavy, his face lined with grim resolve. He looked at me, not at the blood, not at the bodies, but straight at me. They know, he said quietly. They saw the quilt. Now it's not just your father. It's all of them. They won't stop. My hand clenched around the brass key, slick with sweat. The quilt lay crumpled between us, its stitched stars flickering in the firelight like a warning. Grandpa, my voice cracked. What does this key open? He hesitated, eyes dropping to the key, then back to me. Your mother's safe, he said finally. The one she swore no one but you would ever open. And if I'm right, what's inside will explain everything. The flames crackled louder, smoke thickening as the fire spread. But I barely noticed. My mind spun with one burning thought. If we found that safe, we'd find the truth. And the truth was the only thing keeping us alive. The fire had taken hold fast. Flames licked the ceiling beams, spitting sparks across the room. Smoke curled in heavy waves, stinging my eyes and choking my lungs. We have to go. I coughed, clutching the quilt tight against me. Grandpa grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the back door as the front collapsed inward with fire. The bodies of the men lay still on the floor, but I couldn't shake the feeling that their deaths weren't an end, only an alarm. Someone would come looking for them. Soon. Outside, the night air hit me like ice, clearing my lungs but sharpening the terror. The storm had passed, leaving a cruel silence broken only by the crackle of fire devouring the cabin. I turned, watching flames consume the only safe place I thought I had left. Grandpa. He didn't look back. His voice was gravel. That cabin was never going to save us. What your mother left will. We need to move. I clutched the brass key so tightly it cut into my palm. The safe. Where is it? Grandpa's gaze flicked to the tree line. Your mother and I built it into the old Walker barn, before your father ever got involved with them. If it's still there, his eyes narrowed. That's where the truth waits. A fresh chill raced down my spine. I remembered the barn faintly, dusty hay bales, rusted tools, the smell of wood and earth. I hadn't set foot inside it since before Mom died. But it's miles from here, I whispered. We'll never make it on foot. Grandpa nodded toward the side of the cabin, where an old pickup sat half buried in snow. She'll run. I hesitated, staring at the truck. My pulse hammered. And if she doesn't? Then we freeze or get caught, he said flatly. Choose. Before I could answer, a sound split the night, a low hum, growing louder. My blood ran cold. Headlights cut through the woods in the distance. Not one car. Several. They're already coming, I whispered. Grandpa shoved the rifle into my hands, his voice sharp. Then you'll learn fast. Cover me while I get her started. I stumbled to the truck, my breath catching as the headlights grew closer, bouncing through the trees. Engines. Tires crunching snow. Grandpa yanked open the hood, his hands working fast. I stood trembling by the driver's side, the rifle heavy in my grip, the quilt pressed against my chest. The men in the woods weren't just searching anymore. They were hunting. And if we didn't move now, the fire behind us would be the least of our problems. The truck roared to life with a violent shudder, coughing smoke into the freezing air. Relief shot through me like fire, but it was short-lived, because the headlights in the trees were closing in fast. Get in. Grandpa barked. I scrambled into the passenger seat, quilt clutched tight, rifle across my lap. The cab reeked of gasoline and old leather. My fingers trembled so badly I almost dropped the key. Grandpa slammed the hood down, vaulted into the driver's seat, and threw the truck into gear. The tires spun on the icy ground before finally catching, lurching us forward just as the first black SUV burst through the trees. Headlights blinded us. A voice crackled through a loudspeaker. Stop the vehicle. Now. Grandpa's jaw was granite. Hold on. The truck fishtailed, snow spraying up behind us as he tore down the unmarked road. My shoulder slammed against the door, my breath hitching in my chest. The SUVs followed, engines growling, beams slicing through the dark. One swerved ahead, trying to cut us off. Grandpa spun the wheel, the truck skidding so hard I thought we'd flip. Grandpa! I screamed. Trust me, he grunted, fighting the wheel. We shot past the SUV, its bumper grazing ours. The rifle slipped in my hands. I clutched it tighter, the metal freezing against my palms. Use it if you have to, Grandpa said without looking at me. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. My stomach turned. I've never. Then learn. Or we don't make it. Another SUV slammed into our rear bumper, jolting me forward. I nearly dropped the quilt. The engine howled as Grandpa forced the truck faster, the speedometer needle trembling. Trees blurred by, the night a tunnel of snow and headlights. Ahead, a fork in the road. Left led toward town, too obvious. Right, a narrow track half buried in snow. Which way? I gasped. Grandpa's eyes flicked toward me. You still remember the barn? My breath caught. The barn. Mom's safe. The truth. Yes, I whispered. Then hold on. He jerked the wheel right. The truck barreled onto the narrow track, snow grinding under the tires. Branches whipped against the windows. Behind us, the SUVs hesitated, then followed. I twisted in my seat, heart pounding as beams of light bounced after us. They weren't giving up. Grandpa, they'll catch us. He pressed harder on the gas, his voice low and fierce. Not if we get there first. The quilt shifted in my lap, its stitched stars glinting in the dim light. I shoved the brass key into my pocket, a single thought burning in my mind. If we reached that barn, I'd finally know what Mom died protecting. But first, we had to survive the night. The old barn appeared out of the snow like a ghost, its roof sagging, its beams bent with age. My breath caught. Nothing had changed since I was little. Except now, headlights were flooding the trees behind us. Out, Grandpa ordered, slamming the truck into park. I stumbled into the snow, clutching the quilt and the key. The cold bit through my coat like knives. The barn loomed ahead, its doors chained but rusted. Grandpa yanked the rifle free, his eyes scanning the woods. Move. They'll be here any second. I sprinted to the doors, my boots sinking deep into the drifts. My frozen fingers tore at the chain until it gave way with a groan, the links scattering into the snow. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. Broken tools lined the walls. Hay crunched under my boots. In the far corner, half buried beneath warped planks, sat the thing I'd only ever seen once as a child, an iron safe, bolted into the floor. There. My voice cracked. Grandpa covered the door, rifle raised. Do it. My hands shook as I knelt by the safe. The brass key trembled in my fingers. The quilt slipped from my arms, falling open on the hay, its stitched stars flickering in the moonlight. Engines roared outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. They're here. I cried. Focus. Grandpa barked. The key slid into the lock. My breath hitched. For a heartbeat, it didn't turn. Then, click. The sound echoed through the barn like thunder. The safe groaned as I pulled the door open. Dust swirled. Inside, a stack of leather-bound journals, a small velvet box, and a folder stamped with a seal I didn't recognize, but I knew immediately. My father's company logo. What is this? I whispered. Before Grandpa could answer, gunfire erupted outside. Bullets shattered the barn windows, spraying glass across the hay. I screamed, ducking low as sparks lit up the dark. They've surrounded us. Grandpa shouted, firing back through the slats. Shadows moved outside, voices barking orders. More glass shattered. A bullet ripped through the wood inches from my face. I grabbed the folder, shoving it under my coat. The journals, the box, there wasn't time. Grandpa. I cried. What do we do? He fired another shot, his jaw clenched. You run. My heart seized. Not without you. His eyes cut to me, fierce and unyielding. You carry the truth, not me. If they take you, it's over. The quilt lay at my feet, the stars stitched by my mother glowing faintly in the moonlight streaming through the broken roof. I clenched the key, the folder, the quilt, every piece of her legacy pressed to my chest. Outside, boots pounded against the snow, getting closer. And in that moment, I realized. I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was fighting to finish what my mother started. The barn doors exploded inward with a splintering crash. Snow gusted in, along with dark figures in heavy coats, their weapons raised. Drop it, old man, one of them barked. Grandpa fired before the words were finished. The first man crumpled, his scream echoing through the rafters. The others fanned out, bullets tearing into the wooden beams. I dove behind the safe, clutching the quilt and the folder to my chest. Splinters rained down around me, the air thick with gunpowder and smoke. My ears rang, my body shook, but my grip on the rifle tightened. Grandpa's voice cut through the chaos. Stay down. Another shot boomed. A man collapsed into the hay, blood pooling under his head. But there were too many. Shadows slipped through the broken windows, boots thundered against the boards. One of them spotted me. His eyes locked on mine. There, he shouted, raising his pistol. Time froze. My breath hitched. His finger curled on the trigger. I didn't think. I moved. The rifle roared in my hands, kicking back so hard it nearly knocked me over. The man's body jerked. He fell, his pistol clattering uselessly to the floor. My scream tore out of me, raw and ragged. I dropped the rifle, staring at what I'd done. My hands shook violently, the weight of it crashing over me. Grandpa grabbed my arm, his grip iron. Look at me. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on the body. Look at me. His voice thundered over the gunfire. I dragged my gaze to his. His face was fierce, but there was something else there too, something almost proud. You just saved your life, he said, steady and sharp. And mine. Don't you ever forget that. Before I could answer, another bullet whizzed past, grazing Grandpa's shoulder. He staggered, blood blooming across his coat. Grandpa. He gritted his teeth, firing back, but his aim faltered. More men were storming in, their boots pounding against the boards, their guns flashing. We can't hold them. I cried, tears burning my eyes. His hand squeezed mine, slick with his own blood. Then we don't. We run. The quilt lay tangled at my feet, the folder hidden under my coat, the key heavy in my pocket. My mother's truth was mine now. But so was the blood on my hands. Gunfire rattled the walls, bullets punching holes through the wood. Hay burst into the air, dust stung my throat, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Grandpa yanked me toward the far corner, blood dripping from his arm. Move. Now. I stumbled after him, clutching the quilt and folder. My legs shook so badly I thought they'd give out, but somehow they carried me across the barn floor. He shoved aside an old trough, revealing a square of rotted planks. He kicked them hard, the boards breaking loose to reveal a black hole in the earth. A tunnel. Down, he ordered, his voice rough with pain. I hesitated, staring into the darkness. Where does it go? Out, he snapped. Unless you want to die here. The pounding of boots grew louder, shadows closing in. I dropped into the hole, the earth cold and damp against my palms. Grandpa slid in after me, pulling the trough back over the opening just as the barn door was blown off its hinges. Dark swallowed us whole. The tunnel smelled of dirt and rust, the ceiling so low I had to crouch. My breaths came ragged, my hands shaking around the folder. Behind us, muffled voices shouted, footsteps thundering above. They'll find it, I whispered. Not before we're gone, Grandpa muttered, pushing me forward. We crawled through the dark, the earth closing around us. I could hear the faint trickle of water, the scurrying of rats. My chest felt like it was caving in. I had to distract myself. My fingers fumbled the folder open, the paper crackling in the silence. The first page caught my eye. A document stamped with my father's company seal. But it wasn't business, it was medical. Clinical notes. Experiments. And right there, in bold letters at the top, Project Eden. My stomach lurched. Page after page, names and numbers blurred past me. Patients. Trials. Failures. And one name circled again and again, underlined in red. Mine. My throat closed. Grandpa. He stopped crawling, his breath harsh in the dark. What is it? They experimented on me. My voice cracked. When I was little. That's what this is. The tunnel felt smaller suddenly, crushing in on me. My father hadn't just thrown me out into a storm. He had used me. And Mom had known. That's why she'd hidden it. That's why she'd died protecting it. Grandpa's voice was steady, but I could hear the fire underneath. Then we exposed them. Every last one. But before I could answer, a sound echoed through the tunnel, metal clanging against metal. Not behind us. Ahead. Someone was waiting. The tunnel narrowed until I could barely breathe, my knees sinking into the damp earth with every crawl. Ahead, faint light glowed through a grate, an exit. Relief surged in my chest. We're almost out, I whispered. Grandpa's voice was ragged behind me. Keep low. Don't stop. I pushed forward, my fingers brushing the iron grate. It was loose. With a sharp tug, it clattered open, and icy air rushed into the tunnel. I scrambled out, dragging the quilt and folder with me, my heart hammering. But the second my boots hit the snow, voices rose from the shadows. "Don't move." Flashlights exploded in my eyes. Figures stepped out from the trees, black coats, rifles gleaming. I froze, breath burning in my throat. Grandpa crawled out behind me, his rifle raised, blood seeping through his sleeve. But there were too many. At least 10 men, circling us like wolves. One stepped forward, his face finally illuminated by the beam of his flashlight. My breath hitched. "Dad!" He smirked, his eyes cold. "Hello, sweetheart." The snow seemed to vanish under me. My father's face, calm as ever, while rifles pointed at my chest. Grandpa snarled, his voice like gravel. "You set this up." "Of course I did," Dad said smoothly. "You think I'd let her wander around with what doesn't belong to her?" His gaze shifted to the folder clutched against me. "Hand it over, darling. It's mine." Anger burned through my terror. "Mine?" My voice shook. "You used me. You experimented on me." I lifted the folder, the pages trembling in my hand. "This says everything." For a split second, something flickered across his face, then it was gone. He stepped closer, the crunch of snow under his boots sharp and deliberate. "You don't understand, do you?" he said softly. "You were never meant to find that. Your mother thought she could stop me, but she was weak. She didn't see what you could become." My chest tightened. What I could become? "Perfect," he said, his smile chilling. "The one success in a line of failures." Grandpa spat into the snow, raising his rifle higher despite his wound. "Over my dead body." Dad's smile widened. "That can be arranged." Rifles clicked. The circle tightened. My grip on the quilt, the folder, the brass key nearly cut into my skin. And in that moment, I realized, if I didn't move now, the truth would die in the snow with us. The rifles gleamed under the pale moonlight, their barrels all aimed at me. The air was so cold it burned my lungs, but the fire in my veins was hotter than anything I'd ever felt. "Hand it over," Dad said, his voice smooth as glass. "No one has to die tonight." Beside me, Grandpa shifted, blood dripping steadily into the snow. He gripped the rifle tighter, his face pale but fierce. "Don't listen to him. That folder is everything. It's proof. Without it, your mother died for nothing." My throat closed. My father's eyes locked on mine, calm, patient, the way he used to look at me when I was a child asking questions he didn't want to answer. "Think, sweetheart," he coaxed. "You can't win. You're surrounded, outgunned. If you give me the folder, you and the old man walk away. You'll be safe. Warm. Federation alive. Alive." The word twisted inside me. I clutched the folder tighter, the edges biting into my fingers. Inside, pages whispered secrets that could shatter him, expose everything. But they also painted me as something I didn't understand, an experiment, a project, a success he had created. "Why me?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Why your own daughter?" For the first time, his calm cracked. His eyes flashed with something sharp, almost feral. "Because you're mine. And mine are not ordinary. You should be proud." Proud. The word made bile rise in my throat. The circle of rifles inched closer. Grandpa stepped in front of me, his breath ragged. "You'll have to kill me first." Dad's smile turned cruel. "Gladly." I felt it then, time slowing, the world shrinking to a single heartbeat. My hands shook around the folder, the brass key heavy in my pocket, the quilt brushing my fingers like a whisper from Mom. If I gave him the folder, Grandpa might live. I might live. But the truth would die. If I kept it, we might all die here in the snow. My father's hand extended, palm open, waiting. His men's rifles glinted. Grandpa's blood stained the snow. And my choice burned like fire in my chest. The folder weighed heavy in my hands, heavier than the rifles aimed at my chest. My father's eyes locked on me, calm, expectant, like he already believed he'd won. I drew in a shaky breath and stepped forward, not to hand it over, but to open it. Pages fluttered in the icy wind, illuminated by the soldiers' flashlights. Clinical notes, failed trials, casualty reports, each one damning. And then, the line I knew would cut through his men like a blade. Human trials conducted without consent. I raised my voice, louder than I thought possible. You think this is your secret? That you can bury it? No. Every one of your men will know what you are. A murderer. A liar. You didn't build an empire, you built it on corpses. The words echoed across the snow. The men hesitated. I saw it, flickers of doubt in their eyes, grips faltering on their rifles. One of them glanced at another, uncertain. My father's mask slipped. His calm cracked into fury. Shut your mouth, he roared, striding toward me. You don't know what you're doing. But I did. For the first time, I did. I yanked the quilt from under my arm and held it high, the stitched stars glowing faintly under the moonlight. This was Mom's. She died for this, for me, for the truth. And I swear, I'll burn every page before I give it to you. I tore one sheet free, crumpling it in my fist. Then, slowly, deliberately, I touched it to the flame of a lantern one of the men carried. Fire licked the edge, curling the paper black. Gasps rose. My father's eyes went wide. No. The circle broke. His men shouted, confusion spreading like wildfire. Some surged forward, others stepped back, torn between loyalty and horror. Grandpa's rifle cracked, dropping one of the closest. Snow erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouts, the blaze of burning paper. I screamed, clutching the folder tight against me. You'll never erase this. Not while I'm alive. And in that moment, I knew my gamble had worked. I hadn't just defied him. I'd made his army question who they were fighting for. Chaos erupted in the snow. His men shouted, some firing wildly, others lowering their rifles as if the truth I'd shouted had sunk its claws into them. Smoke from the burning pages twisted into the night sky, carrying proof of his sins with it. Grandpa pulled me behind a fallen log, his rifle spitting fire at the shadows. We've got one chance. Move while they're turning on each other. But before I could run, a hand seized my coat and yanked me backward. I spun, my breath choking. My father. His eyes burned, his grip like iron as he dragged me away from the confusion. You think you're clever? You think you can destroy me with scraps of paper? His voice was venom, every word seething. Let me go. I screamed, clawing at his hand. No, he hissed. You're mine. You always were. Do you really think your mother kept you alive out of love? She kept you alive because you were proof. My proof. My blood turned to ice. Proof. The word echoed through me, colder than the snow under my knees. Grandpa's voice bellowed through the gunfire. Let her go, you bastard. A shot rang out, splintering the tree beside us. My father pulled me tighter against him, using me as a shield. His men hesitated, unsure who to fire at. You'll come with me, he snarled in my ear. Or I'll put a bullet in your grandfather's head right now. My pulse thundered. I could feel the brass key digging into my thigh, the quilt pressed between us, the folder still clutched in my hands. Everything Mom had left me, everything he wanted. And for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as property. Choose, he whispered, cold and deadly. Your life with me, or his death. The night spun around me, shouts, gunfire, Fire, snow. Grandpa raising his rifle again despite the blood soaking his sleeve. And me, caught between the man who made me and the man who saved me. The world narrowed to his grip on me, his breath hot against my ear, the cold steel of his pistol digging into my ribs. My father. My enemy. My captor since the day I was born, even if I hadn't known it. Drop the rifle, he barked at Grandpa. Or she dies. Grandpa froze, his face carved from stone. His hands trembled, but the rifle stayed leveled. You kill her, you lose everything you're after. A cruel smile twitched across Dad's lips. Not if I make another. That word, make, ignited something in me. Not love. Not even hate. Something sharper. Rage. Before he could react, I drove my elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength I had. He grunted, his pistol slipping just enough. I twisted, slamming my head back into his jaw. The crack echoed. He staggered, his grip loosening. Run. Grandpa shouted. But I didn't. Not this time. I spun, teeth bared, clutching the brass key in my fist like a blade. My father raised the pistol again, but I lunged first, slamming the jagged metal into his cheek. He roared, stumbling backward, blood streaking his face. The pistol clattered into the snow. I dove for it. He dove faster. We both hit the ground, wrestling in the blood-soaked snow, his hands crushing my wrists, his strength overwhelming. You ungrateful little rat, he snarled, pressing me into the ice. I gave you life. You stole it. I screamed, my nails raking across his face. The pistol slid between us, my fingers brushing the trigger guard. His hand crushed mine, forcing it away. His weight pressed down, suffocating. My lungs burned, my vision blurring. And then, crack. A gunshot split the night. For a heartbeat, I thought it was him. That I was dead. But then his body jerked, his eyes going wide. He slumped forward onto me, hot blood soaking my coat. Behind him, Grandpa stood, rifle smoking, his face grim and hollow. I shoved my father's body off me, gasping for air, staring at the crimson spreading across the snow. His eyes twitched once, his lips curling into a final, twisted smile. This isn't over, he whispered. Then he went still. The forest was silent. The gunfire had stopped. His men were gone, or had abandoned him. Only the wind howled now, carrying smoke and ash into the night. I clutched the quilt, the folder, the key, my chest heaving. My father's blood steamed in the snow beside me. Grandpa's voice was rough, pained. It's over. But I wasn't so sure. Because in my heart, I knew, my father wasn't lying. This wasn't over. Snowflakes fell silently over his body, covering him as if the earth itself wanted to bury him fast. My chest heaved, the taste of iron still sharp in my mouth. Grandpa bent beside me, gripping his bleeding arm. We need to move, he rasped. Before any of his men circle back. I nodded, but my eyes stayed locked on the folder, on the papers half-singed by fire. My fingers trembled as I flipped through, scanning lines I hadn't dared to before. Phase 1, incomplete. Subject terminated. Phase 2, viable. Replacements secured. Phase 3. Project Eden is self-sustaining. My throat closed. Grandpa, this wasn't just his project. He wasn't working alone. Grandpa's face tightened. He pressed his good hand to his temple, as if he already knew but didn't want to admit it. Damn it. That's why he was so sure. He wasn't the head, he was a piece. A piece. And pieces could be replaced. I staggered to my feet, the brass key warm against my palm. I remembered the words he'd spat at me in his final breath. This isn't over. He hadn't been bluffing. His death didn't end it. If anything, It triggered something worse. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of engines. Not a car. Not a snowmobile. Low, steady, mechanical. I froze. Grandpa, do you hear that? He lifted his head, eyes narrowing. Helicopters. The trees shook as a searchlight swept over the forest. Shadows danced across the snow. The roar grew louder, closer. I clutched the quilt and folder tighter. Mom's quilt, her stitched stars glowed faintly under the beam of the light. For the first time, I wondered, had she known about all of this? Had she tried to warn me through her codes, her patterns, her legacy? My father was gone, but the thing he served, the machine he helped build, wasn't. Project Eden was still out there. And now, it was coming for me. The forest erupted in light. Search beams cut through the trees, sweeping over the snow like jagged knives. The roar of rotors rattled my bones, sending the quilt's stitched stars fluttering in the icy wind. Grandpa shoved me down behind the log. "Stay low," he hissed, his face pale with blood loss. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from the sky. 2 black helicopters hovered just above the treetops, their insignias unmarked, faceless, like predators circling their prey. The first touched down in the clearing, snow whipping in violent spirals. A squad of figures poured out, their movements precise, mechanical, their faces hidden behind tinted visors. Not Dad's men. Something colder. More official. One of them raised a hand. The rotors slowed, and for a heartbeat, silence fell. Then a voice, sharp, amplified through a speaker, split the air. "Subject 9, surrender immediately." The words pierced through me. My skin went cold. Subject 9. Not my name. Not even my father's name for me. A number. A file. Proof that my whole life had been more controlled than I ever understood. Grandpa's hand gripped mine tight. We run. But the soldiers were already fanning out, rifles up, moving with inhuman speed. Escape through the trees would be suicide. My mind raced, torn in two. If I ran, we might vanish into the wilderness, but we'd be hunted forever. If I surrendered, I risked walking straight into the jaws of Project Eden, but maybe, just maybe, I'd finally learn the truth about what my father had turned me into. The speaker boomed again, harsher this time. "You have 30 seconds. Snow stung my face, my lungs burned with cold air, and Grandpa's grip trembled against mine. 30 seconds to choose between running for my life, or walking into the unknown. And either way, I knew, nothing would ever be the same. The countdown echoed in my head, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Snow lashed against my cheeks like tiny blades. My breath came in sharp bursts. Grandpa's eyes bored into mine, waiting. Run. Or surrender. My father's voice haunted me. This isn't over. He hadn't said it like a threat. He'd said it like a prophecy. I tightened my grip on the quilt, its stars glowing faintly in the helicopter light, and looked at Grandpa. If we run, they'll never stop. They'll hunt us until we're dead. Grandpa's jaw clenched. If you go with them, you might not come back. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. Then I'll make sure I find out what they want, before they can take it from me. The speaker boomed again. 10 seconds. I rose slowly from behind the log, snow crunching under my boots. The rifles turned instantly, red laser sights dancing across my chest. Grandpa cursed under his breath, struggling to stand. "Don't," he rasped. "You don't know what you're walking into." I raised my hands, the quilt still clutched tight in one, the folder in the other. My voice shook, but it carried through the clearing. "You want Subject 9? I shouted. "Then here I am. But you'll tell me everything, or I'll burn this before you can touch it." The soldiers froze. For the first time, hesitation flickered in their ranks. One of them lifted a gloved hand to their helmet, listening to some unseen command. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. A figure stepped out from the helicopter. Not a soldier. A woman in a dark coat, her face half hidden beneath a hood. She moved with an authority that chilled me deeper than the snow. When she spoke, her voice was calm, precise. "You've survived longer than we expected." The words slammed into me. Longer than we expected. Not only had they been watching me, they had been waiting. "Come with us," the woman said, her eyes locked on me. "It's time you learned why your father called you his proof." Grandpa's hand seized mine, trembling but firm. "Don't trust them," he whispered. "Don't you dare." But my heart thundered, because a darker question had already taken root inside me. What if the only way to beat them was to finally discover what I really was? The rotor wash whipped snow into my eyes as I stared at the open helicopter door. Inside, the woman in the hood didn't move, didn't blink, didn't lower her gaze from me. She looked as if she already knew I'd step inside. Grandpa's grip tightened on my wrist. His knuckles were white despite the blood running down his arm. "You don't have to do this. We can still run." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "Run where? They'll never stop. At least this way, I get answers." His face hardened, but his eyes begged me not to go. "Your mother would want me to know the truth," I whispered. "She didn't stitch those stars for nothing." Before I could lose my nerve, I tore free and stepped into the helicopter. The quilt whipped behind me, the folder clutched to my chest. The woman gestured to a seat opposite her. "Strap in." I Saturday. My heart thundered so loud I thought they must all hear it. The door slammed shut. Grandpa's figure blurred in the storm as the helicopter lifted, his rifle raised helplessly against the night. The woman pulled back her hood. Her face was sharp, pale, ageless, eyes like glass. She studied me as though I were less a person and more a specimen. "You've been asking the wrong question," she said smoothly. "Not what Project Eden is, but who." The words crawled across my skin. "Then tell me, what am I?" Her lips curved faintly. "You are Subject 9. The 9th viable host of the Eden Protocol." "Host?" My voice cracked. "Host for what?" She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming under the cabin lights. "For the cure your father died protecting, and the weapon he never wanted you to discover you carry." The helicopter tilted sharply, heading into the mountains, into darkness. My blood turned to ice, because I realized. They hadn't come to take the folder. They had come to take me. The helicopter carved through the storm. Below, the forest faded into endless white, and ahead, mountains loomed like jagged teeth. The woman in the hood didn't take her eyes off me. "Your father was a liar. He wasn't trying to stop Project Eden. He was trying to control it. He knew what you were and kept you hidden, even from us. That's why we call you the lost subject." My throat burned. "You're wrong. I'm not your experiment." Her gaze flicked to the quilt folded on my lap. "He told you the quilt was a keepsake, didn't he? A relic of your mother's love. Look closer. The stitches aren't decorative. They're a code. Coordinates. Instructions. A map of where the other subjects were buried." The air left my lungs. My mother, her love, a map. I shook my head violently. "No. You're lying." She leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "A host always resists before awakening." My skin prickled with heat. My pulse thundered out of rhythm. A sharp pain tore through my chest, so sudden I doubled over. My vision blurred, my veins lit with fire. "What's happening to me?" I gasped. Her lips curved. "Your blood is adapting. Project Eden wasn't about creating soldiers. It was about creating vessels. Your father called you his proof because you survived what killed the others. I clutched my chest, panic surging. My mother's stars blurred in my vision, spinning, glowing, like they were alive. You are not human, the woman whispered. You are the Eden seed. The last one. The helicopter plunged into a hidden valley, and through the storm I saw it. A black compound rising from the ice, glowing with floodlights, surrounded by towers like watchful sentinels. I knew without being told. This was Project Eden's heart. Inside, sterile corridors stretched forever, lined with glass panels. Behind them, shapes. Some human, some not. Pale bodies floating in tanks, stitched with tubes. Some looked dead. Some twitched. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. What is this place? The woman's voice was calm, clinical. A sanctuary. A laboratory. A womb. All the others failed, burned out, broken, gone. But you are the ninth. The final seed. I pressed the quilt against me, as if my mother's touch could shield me. I won't be your experiment. She smiled faintly. It isn't a choice. It's already in you. That pain you feel, it's your body rejecting its limits. Soon, the seed will awaken fully. And when it does, the world will either bow or burn. They strapped me into a chamber, metal clamps biting into my wrists. The pain in my veins grew unbearable, my blood boiling like it was no longer mine. Through the glass, the woman watched. Your father thought he could keep you hidden. But you were never his to claim. You belong to Eden now. Her words blurred into static. My chest heaved. The quilt slipped from my grasp, falling open across the floor. For the first time, I saw the pattern fully, stars aligned in a spiral, pointing not to places, but to a lock. And the brass key in my pocket pulsed with heat. My mother hadn't stitched a map. She had stitched a prison. And I was the door. Rage exploded in me. With a scream, I yanked my arms against the clamps, metal groaning. The key seared in my pocket, the stars on the quilt glowing like fire. Energy surged through my veins, ripping through the chamber in a blinding flash. The glass shattered. Sirens blared. Soldiers shouted. I staggered to my feet, flames licking across my skin but not burning me. My blood roared with a power that was both mine and not mine. For the first time, I understood why they had called me the seed. I wasn't just a subject. I was the weapon. The compound burned behind me as I staggered into the snow, the quilt draped across my shoulders, the key glowing faintly in my hand. Grandpa was waiting. He'd found me, blooded, limping, but alive. His eyes widened at the sight of me, fire still crackling in my veins. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. I met his gaze, my voice raw. "They didn't do this. Mom did. Dad knew. And now, I can't put it back." Above us, the helicopters circled, but none dared land. The soldiers who survived stayed hidden, afraid. Because they no longer wanted to capture me. They wanted to survive me. Grandpa gripped my shoulder, steadying me as the storm swallowed us both. "Then we'll make them regret ever trying to claim you. We'll finish what your mother started." I clutched the quilt tighter, the stars burning against my skin. My father was dead. Project Eden wasn't. But they had awakened something they couldn't control. And I wasn't running anymore.